All right. Well, hopefully everybody listening to this show heard our first show together, Charles, and heard us end with you mentioning the reality of writer's block. I thought, man, what a great thing, because there's got to be talking about habits and routines. Let's start there. Writer's block. So the day you get up and you're not feeling it, creative juices aren't flowing, what do you do?
One of the bits of advice I got early on in this business was treat this like a job. If you were to clock in for somebody else, treat this like that, and clock in and clock yourself out, and spend the time in the chair. Also, don't wait on the muses. They're seldom on time, and usually what they have to say isn't any good anyway. So just be a storyteller and write stories. So sort of with that encouragement, I've always been really good at getting up early, and I would find myself awake between 3 and 4 in the morning, maybe 4 and 5 or whatever. And I would get up, make some coffee, come sit down, and I would write until we got the boys up and got them to school. And then I'd come sit back down and I'd write till about noon or 2. And that was about kind of all my backside could handle. And then I would get up and I would go do something physical, be it get on my bike or go for a run or work out or whatever. And that physical thing would let my brain kind of unwind all the knots I had put it in the previous 4, 6, 8 hours of writing or whatever it is, that just became what I had to do what I do. I don't know how other people write. I know some other writers, and I feel like my discipline has been helpful, at least to me, because I've met deadlines, and I've met hard deadlines, and that's been kind of a thing in my career. My publishers count on me. If they can't count on me, then it's tough for them to know when a book's coming out. So that's why I say I sweat my books more than I write them, and I'm a better rewriter than I am writer. A lot of times, if I can just get the words on the page where I can see them, it's kind of like clay. I can come back and or oil on a canvas. I can come back and kind of touch up the canvas, but let me get an image out there. That's just become my process. And it's not uncommon for me to rewrite a scene 12 or 15 times. That doesn't mean I'll rewrite the whole thing, but I'll go through, like when I send my book to my editor, I've read it, and I've read it out loud to myself several times. That's something I picked up from James Michener late in his life. He was 84, 85, had a massive heart attack. And following that, he wrote 4 more books. His books are four times the size of mine. His books were about 400,000 words apiece. And with every one of them, he and his assistant would read it out loud twice before they sent it to the publisher. And that's one of the most valuable tools I've ever learned, because your ear picks up what your eye is so lazy to miss. And so tell your son that when he's working on his writing. Yeah. I've told all my sons this in school, and when I've been invited to speak on writing, the best advice I ever received was read it out loud to yourself, because your ear will pick up what your eye misses. It's also another thing that I learned is that my books have a little bit of a cadence, not a little bit, they have a lot, and they sound like me. If I spend a lot of time reading other writers, their writing interferes with my cadence. So I'm careful to guard who I read or what Audible I listen to, and that person's cadence better match mine if I'm going to spend time listening to them. Daniel Silva, John Grisham, those are 2 guys who I feel like, obviously they're phenomenal writers, okay? But the way they put words together, their cadence is similar to mine. So it doesn't really mess with my head as much. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm curious, just you getting up in the morning and starting to write, is that your morning routine?
Well, not so much now. I mean, I'm still sitting at my computer between 7:30 and 8. And some, there'll be mornings I'm sitting here at 5:30 and 6, but I've learned how to sit and write for 4 or 5 hours. And I'm 50 now, and there's only so much time that my neck can look at this, you know what I mean? And so but having said that, there were a lot of mornings with this sequel that I just finished where I'm sitting here at 4:30 or 5, happy as a clam, because my brain woke me up and the story was bubbling up. I don't, part of it too is that in the last year, I've dealt with fatigue. Like I've heard people talk about Epstein-Barr and mono and the fatigue that comes with that. And I've wrestled with that. I have never known fatigue. Like you and I were talking a little bit ago about racing bikes, and I've ridden some long distances and I've raced some long distances, and I know physical fatigue, and what I've been wrestling with is fatigue that's deeper than that fatigue. So, not to tell you a sob story, but I've discovered my thyroid is decided it's not working.
Yeah.
So sleep is sort of a precious thing, and I wake up in the mornings now sort of feeling like I've already run a marathon. So I'm in the middle of all kind of blood panels and tests and all that stuff. It's just not easy for me to get up at 4:30 right now, but I will get up at 7, get Reeves to school, be here at 8, sit here till noon or 2 or whatever it is, and so that's how I'm accomplishing kind of where I am.
Yeah, no, I'm curious. I want people to hear, because we have so many people on. I do these habit shows. You hear so much. A common thing that we hear is from the experts is, exercise first thing gets the BDNF and the brain working. And you don't do that, and you've made it anyways. I do like people to hear the different things because it's finding your secret sauce. And we all want to figure out what is the best thing to do. And it's just so individual. So I want people to hear that yours may
Well,
not.
there are mornings when I'll get on my rower, I'll get on my bike in the garage. I have this black bike of death thing, the Rogue thing that you see in all the CrossFit stuff. So there are mornings when I will do 15, 30, 45 minutes, whatever,
Yeah.
just because I need time to but I also know that when I wake up, my brain is at its freshest, and I need to I don't know, have you running a 400-meter dash? There are 2 systems of energy that kick in. The first system of energy lasts for about 60 meters. The second system of energy lasts to the finish line. The first system of energy may or may not get spent depending upon how fast you take off out of the blocks. If you sprint 99%, you're going to burn that system of energy, and then you're going to click into the second, and you're going to finish with whatever's left in your tank. You may or may not spend the first, though. And the writing for me in the morning is like that. My brain is fresh. If I don't spend what I have there in front of the computer, it's kind of gone by noon anyway, whether I've done anything or not.
Yeah.
So it's the most efficient, effective way for me. By the time I get it's 5:00 here in Jacksonville. By the time I get to here, I'm no good for writing. None.
Yeah. No, I totally understand. All my work is creative, and I've realized that I have, as a friend of mine said, a certain amount of creative calories in the day, and then after that, they're gone. I'll ask that. How, if you look at it in that vernacular, you said about 6 hours. Is that kind of your window of creativity? Feeling like I can.
Honestly, now it's probably less. Now, given the last year, if I work 4 to 5 hours now, and when I'm talking about working, I'm not surfing the internet. I'm not messing with email. I'm not messaging people. I am looking at a screen with my words on it, and I'm working. If I get 4 to 5 hours, 6 on the outside, I've done something.
Sleep. You talked about wake up times being different. What's your sleep schedule? How much do you sleep? What's your routine? Going to bed, out of bed, anything specific?
I used to sleep less, but I'm a early to bed person. Christy says next time she gets married, she's gonna interview the person. What time do you like to go to sleep?
Yeah.
Because she's the reader in our family, and she'll stay up till midnight. I'm by 9:30 or 10, I'm about to turn into a pumpkin.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm by 10:30 at night. If I'm not asleep, something else has been required of me.
Yeah.
Because I'm spent. And then, my eyes will sort of crack open at 6 or 6:30, sometimes 5:30 now, whatever. If I've had a long day the day before, I sort of feel like where I am now, trying to figure out my own what I'm capable of. If I do something really hard, be it creatively or physically, I almost feel sometimes like I'm drawing out of it, like I'm doing it on credit. I'm digging it out of the next day or something. So I may end up paying, if I have a really hard day today creatively, I may pay for it tomorrow, and I may work 30 minutes because that's what I have creatively. It hasn't always been that way, but that's where I am now.
Yeah. It's interesting. Just in researching you, that you're an outdoors guy. And well, tell me about that. Tell me that, because it's interesting as I see your characters in your books too, that they usually emulate some of that similarity. But yeah, tell me about the exercise, athletic, outdoor pursuits.
I grew up on the St. Johns River here in Jacksonville. I had what I like to call a real Huck Finn childhood. I mean, we were always outside, always on the river, always fishing. You know, my dad took me hunting at 4 or 5 years old. I've done that my entire life. I'm a pretty passionate bow hunter. I've only, as in that's the only thing I've hunted with now for 12 or 13 years. I'm, that's probably my outdoor, of all the things I love doing outside, bow hunting is up there. I love getting on my son's skiff. We'll go, backwater fishing, snook or redfish or whatever. He is far more the fly fisherman than I, but I do love that. I'm better at throwing a spinning rod sometimes, but I love being with him and doing that. I love being out in your neck of the woods and climbing mountains. And I especially love getting on my bike in the summer out in Colorado and riding those hills out there. That Christy thinks I'm crazy, but I love going up and down mountains. And to be honest, I love going up them maybe more than coming down, because coming down is really fast and it's usually cold.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
so
I know. Yeah, I enjoy going up. But just from a day to day, do you have? Oh, you talked about you got some CrossFit stuff. Do you have a daily uh,
I
consistency?
think my garage is, part storage for our yard stuff, and then it's part, workout room, but I'll, as much as I can, I will get out on my bike. I don't run as much as I used to just because it hurts too much. But I mean, I do love getting lost on my bike for an hour and a half, or 2 hours, or whatever. It is. I don't know how people live without doing that. If you want me to be honest, I don't know. I don't know how folks don't exercise. To me, I would lose my ever loving mind. I don't. I've just done it for so long that it's like breathing. I don't. It's part of my day. I'm going to go work out now for a while, and so I,
Yeah,
it helps my brain as much as anything, because I can certainly tie my brain in some knots, and if I spin my legs for a while, it it helps my brain.
I think anybody who's done it that long feels that way. Well, my 15-year cycling career got interrupted when we had a kiddo, and I spent 2 years sedentary, only 2 years of my life, until my wife conspired with a local bike shop guy, got me a bike. She said, "Honey, please go train. You're just a better person when
Yeah.
you're training." Yeah, interesting. So, how about the nutritional side of life? What's happening there?
A couple of years ago, I began wrestling with, like, the afternoon. Like, if I ate anything carb driven lunchtime, I'm crashing bad after that, and so my afternoon is gone. And so I began looking at this whole keto paleo thing and intermittent fasting. And if I had my druthers and I did what I wanted to do, and I'm not, I don't always do that because we're fixing food for family and they may or may not like what I like to eat, but I think intermittent fasting is a really good idea. I wouldn't eat until about noon or 1 o'clock. And then I would sort of cut that window off at about 6 or 7 o'clock at night. And that's just sort of my rhythm. I'm not a real pure keto person because I guess you could say I'm more dirty keto, if that's a thing.
I haven't heard that. I like it though.
But it's like, I think it would mean you tend more towards animal fats and not enough plant driven
Okay.
produced fats. Okay, whatever. But I have to be careful about too much carbs, and I love pasta and bread just like everybody else. I'm not a big candy person. I don't do sodas. I'm not a big sugar person, except when it comes to pasta. So I have to sort of, I mean, I can eat that at night because then I'll just go sleep. But I have to be careful what I do during the day because my diet greatly affects my ability to sit in this chair. Because I mean, I can, like, if I eat a bunch of, I haven't had pancakes in the morning for 20 years because if I eat them, I'm going to go take a 3-hour coma nap from the carb dump. It's just the way I work. So I don't eat them.
That's my favorite thing about intermittent fasting. I don't eat generally in the mornings because I that afternoon crash, I loathe it. I loathe it. I mean, I'm good for nothing. I can hardly deal with emails at that point. I might as well just not be working, and that needs to happen. So yeah, I'm with you on that. Relationally, and we talked in the first show together about the review slash testimony that your son Charlie gave on your latest book. And I don't know if anything could say more about who you are than that, but you sound like you have a vibrant relationship with your family. Tell me what you do to foster that.
Well, I guess to start with, I love them a whole lot. I mean, I married my best friend. I mean, we're just two kids in love. We've been married 27 years, but I still love going for walks with my wife. Going for a ride, spending time with her, I'll bring her coffee in the morning. We call it knee time, where we're sitting close enough for our knees to touch. And, I mean, I love being with her. There's not really anybody else I'd rather be with more. So I love being with Christy. Our boys are, I mean, I know you got kids, but my boys are the 3 greatest kids on planet Earth. And I love hanging out with them, especially now that they're older, because
What are the ages?
23, 20, and 17, almost 18. So we're able to do a lot. They're passing from the me being father, then them being son, to us being more friends. That doesn't mean I'm not their father, but I mean, there's a thing that happens like organically where you have this friendship that sort of develops, which has been really cool to see. I love it. I mean, now Christy and I do spend a lot of time praying for our boys because, the world hates them and they do have an enemy that prowls around like a roaring lion, and he really does want to rip their head off. So we pray for them a lot. And I don't, I spend time. Somebody told me a long time ago, they said, your kids will spell love Time. And that's been my experience.
I want to still talk about that real quick, how you've done that. I mean, that for anybody, you or anybody, but we've got careers, we've got things that are happening. It's easy to say that we are stressed with time. How have you habitually invested time in your boys?
Well, I'm fortunate in that I do work for myself. I do control my schedule. Part of the reason I control my schedule and I get up early and work is because about 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm done working. And that allows me, like, I've gone to most all of my boys' practices if they had a practice, be it football, cross country, taekwondo, whatever. I've been able to do that with them. And it wasn't an obligation. I genuinely wanted to go watch and hang out. And so that's just kind of been a blessing of my life as a writer. But that doesn't happen if I don't get up and put the time in the morning, because I'm not going to go to their practice if I've still got words to write. I won't be present. The only way I can really be present is if I've done kind of the work that needed to get done in the first place. There was when our boys are little, like all boys play baseball. So like my boys are outside playing baseball, and I thought, okay, well, we're going to go down to the local rec club, and they all signed up. And the next thing I know, I'm coaching baseball, and I coached all their baseball teams for about 6 or 7 years. And, one day I'm trying to get everybody in my truck with all their gloves and cleats and bats and hats and helmets and all of the stuff that goes with it. And I'm fighting them to get in the truck. We finally get in the truck and we're driving down the road to practice. And I look in the rearview mirror and all three of them are sitting back there and nobody's smiling and nobody's happy and nobody wants to go to that practice. And it struck me, I'm driving this train because it was once a good idea, but it's not a good idea now. And they're miserable. And so I just sort of slowed down. I said, guys, do y'all want to do something else? And it wasn't an ugly, I wasn't poking them in the chest. It was a genuine, and they all nodded. And I said, well, okay, if you didn't play baseball, and you don't have to play baseball, like, okay, it's all right if you're not Chipper Jones. What would you want to do? And at the time we were driving by a place about a mile from our home, and it was a martial arts studio. And two of them pointed and said, we want to do that. The next day I walked in and met this guy, Jason Watson, who owned this Taekwondo school, signed up my boys. And because they were going to do it, I thought I'll just do it with them. So for the next 4 or 5 years, we took Taekwondo and all got our black belts. And I mean, it was just something that we did. I don't know what other people do, but like, that's what my boys wanted to do. And it seemed like a good idea. So that's what we did.
It's awesome. Spiritual, the disciplines there. I love the term spiritual disciplines myself. Tell me about the spiritual routines. That actually doesn't sound good. Spiritual routine. You get my point. Yeah. The consistent things that you do for your spiritual walk.
I love, I think it's Eugene Peterson's phrase, a long obedience in the same direction. And that is, look, if you knew me and you knew my thoughts, you would know that I am not some great man of faith. Do I love the Lord? Absolutely. Am I surrendered to his dominion and lordship over my life? Yes, absolutely. And I'm also a blacked, wicked sinner. I mean, I am. I mean, I'm redeemed, but I still need him, like a lot. So I spend time in his word. King David said, I've hidden your word in my heart so that I might not sin against you. Jesus said, man can't live on bread alone, but on every word that proceeds out of the mouth of the Father. It's probably a good idea that I spend some time. And it's not this obligation thing. I don't show up and grab this thing off my shelf and go, okay, well, I got to put 30 minutes in today so I can, it's not. I like Jeremiah. I love his word, and I get to know him. So my boys have seen that, and they've walked in this office 1,000 times and seen me reading or coming in the morning and found me with my coffee. And then I've prayed with my boys 10,000 times. Very few times in this house have they ever gone to sleep, even today, now that they're older, with us not having prayed somewhere before one of us goes to bed. Just, that's my role as priest of my house. When they were younger, I felt like, man, I feel like I'm sending them off to school. And to be honest, I really don't know what they're learning at school. I mean, I know what classes they're taking, but that doesn't mean I know what they're learning. And I got to figure out a way to get this word into them, because I believe it's life to those who find it and health to one's whole flesh. I mean, that's what the Proverbs say. That's what Solomon says. So I would sit down at breakfast, like we'd fix some breakfast, and I'd sit down and I would read them. I've kept this long list of scriptures that I wanted to memorize or know. And so in the mornings, we would kind of play this game where I would start a scripture, I would read it and start it, and they would finish it, or they would fill in the words. Did they always like that? No. Were there mornings when they would show up having, being tired, and here's dad doing this thing with, and they weren't too sure? Yes. But today, when my oldest two come home and I'm sitting at the table with Reeves, the youngest, and I do that, the other two will show up and sit down, and it'll become this game where they're trying to finish the sentence before Reeves. And they know it, and the word has been buried in their hearts. And the reason I do that is not because they're punching some box or some obligation, but because they really do have an enemy. Like, they woke up in a world at war, and they are at war with something that hates them. and they're going to come some tough times in their life. What are they going to lean on? If they don't know the Lord and they don't know his word, they're going to gravitate toward a whole lot of other stuff that will not satisfy, and it will not bring life, and it will enslave them. So if I can pour this word into their hearts now in such a way that it's like, I mean, Jesus said, from the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. If I can pour it in there, when things get difficult, and this has been true in my life, it will become the thing that I believe the Holy Spirit will bring it to mind, and it'll begin echoing in their minds. And I've found that to be true. I found that to be true with Christy and I found that to be true with them. It's like, it's what we have.
It's just convicting, Charles. Thank you. I got one more for you I want to know about. I know a little bit. You talked a little bit about it. Just the personal side. And I run through 4 terms, whichever one hits you. Self-care, fun, play, hobbies. What falls in when in any of those?
Well, I would go back a lot to, like, I really do love working out. I am not the athlete I once was, but I do love it. Like, when you talk about self-care, I really genuinely don't know how people make it to 50 and not do something every. I mean, it's just me. I'm not judging folks. I'm just telling you, I don't know how I would not be here 20 novels or 20 books down the road in a 22-year writing career if I didn't do that. That is both self-care and hobby for me. When it comes to about September 15th, which we're getting close to, hunting season kicks in, and that runs through February-ish, depending upon where you hunt. And that's, I'm pretty passionate about that. And it's also, look, that's where my dad and I spent time. That's where he poured into me. That's where we would sit on the back of the truck and eat Vienna sausages and sardines and crackers and, moon pies, and hang out and talk and laugh. And to this day, that I hope the same for my boys. Reeves and I'll get out of here, and we're going next weekend, and we'll hang out and cut up. And it's just tender time with my boys. I also really love sitting in the woods. Like, I really love being quiet. I love not having this thing with me and taking my bow and going and sitting in a tree and just listening to the woods, either wake up or sort of tune down. And so I think if I'm honest, and if Christy were sitting here, in the last 10 years of my life, my career has required a lot of me. The last 2 years, I've written 4 books. I haven't allowed myself as much of the life-giving things, or the things that fill up my well, as much as I have spent time drawing from my well. And if she were sitting here, she would say the next year has got to look like Charles has got to figure out a way to fill up as well, because you can't draw from an empty well. And I've worked at least as hard as I know how. I've worked really hard, and I think we're seeing it kind of in my physical person to some extent. So she and I are now talking about, okay, in the next year, how do you do what you're called to do, be the writer that you are, the dad, but you got to figure out some way to pour back in, or let the seep well seep, or let the spring bubble up, or whatever. I can't continue on this pace. And so that's my question kind of for me, is how do I allow myself to be a little bit selfish, or a little bit more selfish with my time, or my sleep, or my whatever I do? Like, that's the question in front of me.
That not being able to draw from an empty well, that is a lot of listeners will hear that and know that that's a mantra of my other podcast, the True Life podcast. We focus on just that. How do we, it's not a health and wellness focus so much as an end, means to an end of being able to get out of us what we want. Hey, thank you. Thanks for the behind the scenes, for the humility, and just for sharing. It was rich. It was really rich.
Look, I've loved it, and I'm grateful for the invite. So thanks for spending some time with me.
Absolutely.